Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Welcome, everyone. If you enjoy the show, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platform and YouTube. You can now also check out the full video episode on X. Please also consider sharing your favorite episodes and leaving a review. If you do that and tag me or send me a screenshot, I will enter you in a monthly raffle for a free 30-minute consultation with me. The last 2 months' winners are Bruce Huckfelt on X at Gold Medal Dad and Corey on Instagram at Ultra Corey. I will shoot both of you guys a note and get you set up with your consultation. For full episode details, including notes, timestamps, transcripts, and the show Patreon page, and other ways to support the show, please head over to my website at zachbitter.com. There you can find all my coaching services, including some new offerings for 2025. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter, where I have been publishing my training journal weekly, as well as other topic-based posts. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website or at hpopodcast@gmail.com. A big thanks to Element, Delta G Ketones, Currents, and Maui Nui Venison for supporting the podcast. A full description of how I use these products can be found at the end of the episode. Discounts, promotions, and details can also be found in the show notes and at the end of the episode. All right, Dan, thanks for taking some time out of your Sunday to chat to me about running insanely long distances and winning.
We did those two things.
Yeah. So what are we're probably about a week out from Cocodona now. How's your body kind of feeling after getting that all done? Traveling back to the East Coast, I assume there was probably a little bit of logistics there and kind of settling back into things.
Yeah, body is good. I mean, after the race, even during, I was surprised with how little was bothering me. I was kind of expecting, I had been telling people here, I was like, hey, I'm fully expecting to be injured after this race. So if I'm a jerk, I'm sorry. I'm just going through it because I can't run. And luckily that didn't happen, but I was fully prepared to be injured. So not being injured was a huge win. And yeah, I just had some the classic, like a little bit of my Achilles hurt just a tiny bit during the race. And then like your feet swell up pretty bad. And, that makes traveling a little bit less pleasant. But other than that, I mean, it was pretty good. We're feeling pretty good right now.
Nice. Did you see that post that Ryan Sands put up of his foot swelling?
Yeah, dude. He had the 1 foot swell, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, when it starts looking like a water balloon, you know that you've done a little work to it.
Exactly how my feet kind of look too. I mean, for like 3 or 4 days, it was kind of like my calf was just the same thickness to my toes. It's like you took
Yeah.
a thin balloon, like an animal balloon, and just like put a kink in it, and like that was my leg and foot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's just one of those things. I just had Megan Eckert on the podcast, and she just set the women's 6-day world record. So like, yeah, it's just like your body is so out of whack. I mean, people who kind of follow that stuff probably think like you finish something that you just pass out for 24 hours. But the reality is like everything's so off balance between hydration, just hormones, your body's achy. Yeah, it's just in a weird spot. So like you usually don't sleep great necessarily that night before. And then if you got to travel back, you had probably had some travel. Ryan Sands had to fly back to South Africa, I presume. So like he was probably on a crazy flight after that. And it's just like, just throwing one thing after another at it. So it's nice that you're bouncing back pretty quickly, though.
Yeah, for sure. My travel wasn't nearly as bad as his, I can imagine, but I mean, yeah, it's just your standard. Like you got to get to the airport and which with this race it kind of sucked because the bags were way heavier than normal. Usually I travel to a race with like one check bag and then like a backpack, and this was like 2 check bags. They weighed like 1,000,000 pounds because it's just like a bunch of gels and stuff. And so I'm like lugging these things to the airport, which I mean you check them so you don't carry them the whole time, but still, I can't imagine doing all that and then flying for like however long he flew and then getting off and then you got to wait for your 60-pound bags to get off the carousel.
Yeah, there's so many logistics. One thing I wanted to ask you about that I was kind of curious about too, with just you doing the Cocodona 250, winning it, breaking the course record, is I was kind of following some of your results over the last few years, and you've got such a good progression with like the 100-mile race, especially like with Javelina specifically. Like we were in the field together in 2023 at Javelina. You had a great race there, fourth place, just over 13 hours, historically relevant time for that course. And then you followed that up the next year, moving up a spot to third, breaking 13 hours, which is a very relevant time at Javelina. Now it seems like breaking 13 hours is the new standard at Javelina. Um, so my thought is like watching that trajectory, it's like, well, Dan's going back to Javelina and he's going to try to move up one more spot and get that golden ticket to Western States. Maybe that is the plan, but what I'm kind of curious about is when you're sitting down and planning your schedule for the year, what was it about Cocodona that kind of stood out that you're like, hey, I think I'm going to take a swing at something longer yet and see how I can do it 250?
Definitely. So like, yeah, the 100 miles, I think more my speed. The 100K is fun, but man, I just don't know if I have. I think I could work on it. I just maybe haven't had my best day or my best training blocks getting ready for hundreds or who knows what. But I just feel a lot more comfortable in a 100 mile and just like confident. And I've always wanted to just run further than that. Even when I was in like high school and college and stuff, I'm like, dude, I just want to run like as far as I can run, kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
initially, that looked like kind of dreaming about like 48-hour, 24-hour runs and stuff, and just kind of putting that off because it's not doesn't really make sense if you're running like track and cross country to one train for those things and two do them. You're not really allowed to do them. Um, and so I've always wanted to do it, and then I wanted to do Cocodona a few years ago, and it was kind of like suggested by some people around me, like, dude, you should probably just focus on your speed now because like you're young and you don't want to go do that. And it's like you could definitely get faster. And but I've wanted to do it. And then my buddy Ryan Ramsby, who crewed me this year, ran it last year, and I got to go out and pace him and crew him for some of it, for like about more than half of it. And it just solidified my like want to do it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to wait around and do it whenever I'm like quote unquote like older. I'm already
Yeah.
28, which I mean, it's not super. It's not like old, I guess, but in the sport, it's not like I'm getting younger either. So I'm like, I'm just gonna go ahead and just do it now because, like Javelina, like you said, yeah, my times were great at Javelina, but it's progressing so quickly that it doesn't even really matter, and you don't really get anything out of it. I mean, you get a lot out of it, but you don't. Nothing really happens unless you win or get a golden ticket. No one cares if your
Mm-hmm.
time relevant or like a top five time or whatever it may be. If you don't get a result, then it doesn't really matter. Um, and so I was like, you know what? Before I wait around and go to Cocodona when it's 48 hours to win the thing, I'm
Yeah.
just going to go ahead and go now and then just see what happens so I can at least get in and get some like practice because that's kind of what I want to do. I mean, I hope I can keep doing 200s, and hundreds too. Like I want to stay like kind of as fast as I can stay, um, and be able to do those. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and do it now and hope for the best.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, I've been kind of digging into the history of the sport too a lot more the last year and just kind of figuring out kind of where the roots are with it. And like when you go way back, I mean, people just assume kind of, I mean, the trail side of the sport, I mean, depending on how you define trail, the modern trail side of the sport is kind of new. But when you get into just like the multi-day stuff, like 6-day events and things like that, that's like really, really old, like
That's
hundreds of
super
years
cool.
old. So, like, when you think of it through that lens, it's like, yeah, you could look at it, it's like, oh yeah, I can probably tolerate my peak longer for something that's multi-day than say 100K or 100 mile, but I don't think it's like drastic. And like you said, I mean, the sport's continually growing. We're starting to kind of see the sport, I think, branch out a little bit more from, all right, if you're not good at 100 milers, you're irrelevant. I think there's like a lot of opportunity to build a brand within the sport at multiple different distances and things like that. I also had Charlie Ware on just recently, and he's got the 50-mile world best. He's going to go for the 100K world record, just won the 50K national championships. And it's like he's got a sponsorship and he's making a living on the sport right now with the sub 100-mile stuff. So it's like he's 250. Like if you just follow that Cocodona stream, it was like, yeah, people care about this. So like I think in terms of like kind of progressing within the sport and winning races, like you said, some of it is just, you know, getting in when you can. And one thing I've always thought is an interesting thing to or perspective to take with ultra running is like these are long, mentally and physically grueling events. So if a specific type is calling you, don't wait, just figure out the best way to do it. And if you recover from it, I don't think there's anything to suggest that you wouldn't be able to do like a speed work development phase once you're fully recovered from Cocodona and be fast enough to still run your best 100 miler. So I think you maybe took advantage of the opportunities the right way.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. I mean, that's kind of how I feel and kind of how I thought going into it. Because I mean, I didn't really train that differently for this race. I did a little less speed work, maybe like on the high end, maybe like 20 miles more per week than I would probably do. Maybe 25, 30 at the high end on the high weeks, and then like some stair climber, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was pretty much the only difference. Um, so it wasn't really a huge difference in training as far as fatigue, like long term fatigue or whatever, wear and tear or whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah, and I feel pretty good now afterwards. So, but it is cool you brought up like the history and like of ultra and stuff. Like when I was younger, I had this like mentor kind of guru guy, Lance Pledger, who's since passed away, but he was just like real eccentric old guy that was a substitute teacher at my high school, but then also like an assistant coach. He was just like a running dude. He would just like show up and
Mm-hmm.
shower us in like knowledge and stuff. And he would get all these like articles and like news clippings and stuff, and he would photocopy them onto one piece of paper. You know what I mean? Like take scraps of paper and make one big paper out of it. But it would be like history of running and like people doing 6 hour events and like crazy like people in like the 1900s running like early 1900s running like kind of stuff like you do like multiple days inside on a track. They're like
Yeah.
drinking alcohol and like taking drugs and just doing crazy stuff to like run forever. And I always thought that was super cool. And then he introduced me to a guy that you probably know, but Ted Corbett.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I read his like little book and some stuff about him, and that dude's just was an animal, and like people like Jerry Lindgren who were like not necessarily ultra runners, but would train like unknown miles per week just because they didn't know any better because the science wasn't out and people weren't like volume is bad for some people. They were just running like 180 miles a week as like 19-year-olds, which I think is pretty insane. So that stuff's always been kind of on my mind. I'm like, well, you know, they could do it back then. I'm like, surely with modern shoe technology and like good food, you could pretty much do whatever you want now. Hopefully, if you're
Mm-hmm.
able to, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely have a lot more resources to kind of help get the body turned around from that sort of stuff. I do always wonder about that with like with some of those like 6 day events back in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, like the shoes and stuff they were wearing. It's like their feet and the different like tendinitises and like stuff that they probably were like just like normalized was probably pretty insane. But yeah, it is, I think you're thinking about it the right way. It's like the training itself is I think the training is like if you're fit, that's going to take you most of the way. And then it's like there's like a certain like maybe 8 weeks or so prior to the event we're getting specific towards the demands of that are probably important. And then if there's like a skill set involved like technical descending or pole usage or something like that, then maybe you want to spend a little more time with it. But yeah, being like, you know, for you being in sub 13-hour shape at Javelina coming off of last year going into Cocodona, it's like you're going to be able to as long as you execute your plan properly, like you're going to do fine there. Assuming you translate well to that duration and distance, and you clearly do. So I would be kind of curious about just what you're kind of training. Do you have like a philosophy that you typically follow with kind of training when you're kind of in the thick of it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I started really training a lot. You would say, or more, significantly more, right after college. So I got out of college, probably took about. So I graduated college. I took a fifth year, and so I stopped going to school in 2019. And um, after that, I started like kind of just running a little bit more. but nothing crazy. And then about 2020, 2021, when I wanted to get into doing more like doing ultras and stuff, my training philosophy, which looking back is kind of not the best, but I was kind of like, well, I'm making up for lost time, was just to run as much as possible without getting hurt, at least
Mhm.
for me, whatever that looked like. And so I was kind of just running a lot more, doubling like every day, multiple workout stimuluses, which I think is good just in general, especially if one's pretty easy and you do that for a long time, it's not really that much extra wear and tear on you. It's kind of just like normal. Your body's like pretty used to it. So just running more in general, and then the classic, like you get kind of into a rate. You're always maybe doing a couple little speed workouts here and there, but then when you get maybe sign up for a race, and then you have probably you know 6 to 8 months, then you start maybe doing some more workouts, like two a week or something, like one a little bit lighter, like interval, one a little bit longer, like a steady state or a tempo or whatever it is. Like something for Javelina, for example, you would definitely do some longer tempos and stuff. Um, so things like that and then just keeping your long runs good. I mean, I don't really cut down or anything on long runs if I do them on the road, unless it's like in place of a workout. And then with trail, you got to get on the trail. That's like that was my biggest issue initially, is kind of running on the trail. I tell people all the time, I'm a terrible trail runner. I just happen to run trail races because
Yeah.
I don't really run trail that often, compared to some people. Even now, I don't. But before, probably 2 years ago, it was even worse. I mean, I would run trail once a week. Sometimes I'd not even run trail that week. But leading up to Cocodona, I ran trail the most I've ever ran trail. So like 2 or 3 times a week, and then the long run would always be half road, half trail. So I'd get 3 or 4 hours on the trail every week on Sunday. Um, and so that was really beneficial. I think just ankle stability and like the classic things you would gain from running on trail. Because that's usually one of my weaknesses, is like just destroying my ankles repeatedly on the trail. And
Mhm.
so luckily, I honestly only rolled my ankle slightly once during Cocodona, and I never fell. And I was like, that's pretty good for 58 hours worth
Yeah.
of trail. To
Yeah, it
only
is.
fall, to never fall and barely roll my ankle, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And some of those trail sections out there on that course too, they're not javelina butter smooth. So there's plenty of opportunities to turn your ankles and fall. So you were on point, I guess.
Yeah, it felt like it. I was like, well, plus it was a little muddy. So, I mean, some of the sections where I think we would have tried to run faster later in the race, you couldn't. You just were hiking,
Mhm.
kind of walking. And so that probably helped too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the interesting thing about this year because I think when people looked at it from the outside in, it was almost like, okay, this year's going to be fast because you're not dealing with that sort of extreme heat in the early stages that has always been historically difficult at that event because you sort of have like less access to resources given the location of that first 50K, but you're kind of going through the hottest section of the course. So on a hotter year, even a normal year, it's like you're probably going to get up to Crown King a little bit dehydrated no matter how good of a job you do. So you're digging yourself out of a hole to some degree. Whereas this year it was cool or well, relatively cooler anyway. I'm sure it was still probably a little bit warm during the day in the kind of the Phoenix or the earlier stages of the race. But when you guys got up to that, some of those sections where it was like really, really muddy, it was very muddy. It wasn't just like, oh, there's a puddle here and there. Like I remember seeing pictures of like people, their shoes are just like literally just like clogged with like wet mud. So it's like you guys definitely had a slow portion of that course relative to other years too, where normally the weather would probably be great in that section and harder ground you could really start cooking through there if you had managed yourself right.
Oh yeah, I mean, everyone's been talking about it, but the fields, there's like the two big pastures you kind of go through. One's like
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 miles, the other one's like 7 miles long, kind of. Those were absolute kind of the worst. It was super runnable. Um, it was at night, so I mean, it would have been a little cooler anyway if it was a normal year, and it was just so muddy that you had to just walk for miles. And it was absolutely just like you said. You would take a couple steps, like 5 or 6 steps, and then you have like an inch and a half of mud underneath your shoe, and you couldn't just like shake it off. So then you're scraping your feet on like grass tufts that are interwoven with cactus, and you're just like, please don't nail a cactus right now. But that was another thing too. I don't know if anyone said that, but dude, scrape the action of scraping your foot at whether you're pulling it or pushing it off of like on a rock or something. That kind of gets feeling kind of weird when you're like like 100 and some miles into a race. That's kind of a weird muscle to be using when you're
Hmm.
supposed to be running and you're like pulling your foot over and on stuff. I'm lucky, like nothing. At one point, the back of my right knee hurt just for a little bit, and I was like, man, please don't start hurting really bad because I have to continually scrape this mud off. So if that hurts, then I'm kind of like relying on the pacer to lean down there and like scrape the mud off my shoes for me. But luckily, it didn't become an issue. But yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when you, so when you got started with the race itself, like going in, was the goal always, okay, I'm gonna try to win this thing and set the course record, or were you just sort of, I'm just gonna go there and run what I think is appropriate and see what happens?
yeah. So we had, I mean, I had done the training and I had felt really good. I'd ran a 100 miler a few weeks before the race. Felt great during it. Ran pretty easy and ran 17 hours and then ran 100 miles the next week. And I was like, okay, that's a good, like, going into the race, I thought if I can run 100 miles easily, I could hopefully compete for 250, you know? Like, if I could
Hmm.
run that relatively unfazed, it'd be pretty easy. Then that's my body's at least going in the right direction. And then we started looking at the competition, which I never had really looked at a lot before. And then my cat just jumped up here. Hold on a second. Sorry,
No
dude.
worries. Not the first cat that has joined the podcast.
It's on a window. It's on a window hammock, dude. It's like not looking good, but I think she'll be okay. But yeah, it we started looking at the competition, and I was like, well, what's it gonna take to like? I wanted to be at least in the top. That was the main goal, I guess. It was just to be kind of in the front and run my own race or whatever. And I was kind of thinking, based on my crew chief's kind of like calculations on other races I've done, other terrain, the terrain of this race, the elevation per mile in different sections, and kind of the terrain. 56 hours would kind of be reasonable, and I was kind of thinking like 55 to 56 hours is kind of what it's going to take to like win 57 hours ish in that time frame. Like given who's going to be there, um, which I guess that's a course record, but I wasn't necessarily thinking of the course record. It was more just like, how do I stay in the top, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and so that was kind of the mindset going in. But then, with the mud and stuff, kind of threw a wrench in it. So I wasn't really planning on a course record until probably almost one of the last aid stations. And they're like, dude, you're still like a couple hours up on the course record. Like, what are you trying to do? And I'm like, well, I guess if we've made it this far now, we might as well try to get a course record, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of when that happened, but it wasn't necessarily the initial goal.
A big thanks to Element, Delta G Ketones, Currents, and Maui Nui Venison for supporting the podcast. A full description of how I use these products can be found at the end of the episode. Discounts, promotions, and details can also be found in the show notes and at the end of the episode. Hmm. Yeah, it was kind of interesting following because it seemed like on the live stream that Harry and Courtney kind of took it out pretty hard. And you were there, like you were very much in it, but you weren't like leading the race at that point. And then they both hit their rough patches, and then you sort of popped up in the lead. And if I remember correctly, at one point Ryan Sands maybe passed you while you were taking a nap, but then you passed him back later than after that when he was taking a nap, and then it was sort of like you just kind of built on your lead from there. Was that kind of how it played out?
Yeah, I would say exactly. They took it out really hot, which going into the race, I kind of knew that my weakest section would be the first. One, just because I don't really have a lot of climbing like availability here in Huntington, West Virginia. And so I was like, I think my strong suits are like running, the runnable sections, and then I was kind of banking on the thought that I really thought going in that my mind was going to be good the whole time, like sleep wasn't going to be an issue, like deprivation wasn't going to be a problem, which I had no real data to support that. I just thought that in my own head. I was like, dude, there's no way I'll have an issue with that. And so yeah, I definitely took it easy in the beginning, but like you said, not super easy because you got to maintain at least some connection there. I didn't want it to get over an hour and a half back from the leader, which I don't think I ever was that far back from Harry when he was leading or Courtney. Um, and so that kind of worked out well. And then, yeah, we just slowly kind of moved our way into the front. And I think by mile 95, we were kind of in the front. Um, and then right before Sedona, after I had slept, we passed Ryan Sands again. And then I think we stayed in the front the whole rest of the race.
Hmm. Yeah, it was kind of interesting because Harry and Courtney, they sort of have they've been to these longer races before, so I think people following were like, okay, we kind of know what we get from these two when they're on. And then Ryan Sands, obviously, he's just been such a fixture in the sport now for quite some time. I think everyone just sort of assumed he's gonna, if he executes his plan well, he'll be in it. And then there was you who popped up into that kind of lead group very early. And if I remember, I think because they interview you guys during this race, which is when they can, and your crews and stuff, which is a really awesome piece to the spectating side of it. And I think they asked you kind of fairly early, like maybe around Jerome or something like that, like what your strategy was, and you were just like, "I'm just gonna run."
Yeah.
So that made me curious. I was curious because you say things when you're out there and stuff like that, but I was curious if like with these races like this, I always find like there's obviously a bunch of logistics and there's almost an unlimited number of things you could try to account for. So you obviously want to make sure you're not putting yourself in a situation where you need something you can't have it or you make a big mistake that's hard to recover from. But then there's also like if you over plan and take it too seriously, you start worrying about things that you can't really predict for and it just beats yourself up mentally. So I was kind of curious about like where you were when you were planning for the race itself. How much thought did you give logistics and things like that and strategy versus just kind of like what came across on maybe that brief interview of just like kind of showed up, figured I'm going to just see what I can do and then whatever happens happens.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of, I like to not do the bare minimum, but kind of think the bare minimum. Um, so for a race like this, I mean, having done one, I thought, well, you can only really control what you do beforehand. So I was like, I'll just train as much as I can within reason, and then I will be hopefully prepared on the start line. And I'm lucky to have the crew that I had because they planned all the other logistics of the race as far as like flights, Airbnbs, driving, who's driving when, like where they're going, how they're getting there, who's in charge of what. I just showed up with my nutrition that I was wanting to eat and some ramen and like my shoes and clothing and just put them in a bag and then they just took the rest. I didn't do a whole lot of research on the course because at the end of the day, you're just pushing the whole time, you're just moving the whole time to get to the end. So I didn't even really know a whole lot about which aid station was next or like how long the segments were. I knew when I was in the race because I'd be like, hey, what's the next aid station? How long is it? But I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this section has this much gain and halfway through the terrain turns to this and then turns back to this. I was just like, whatever happens is like what happens. You're only just traveling to the end. And so that helped, I think, just kind of keep all the external noise out and just focus on moving and just continually moving um, to the end. And that's tried to keep, yeah, that's basically how I did it. I didn't really think a whole lot about it and just focused on, relentless forward progress, as they say. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much what I did and just kind of bided my time to get to the later sections because I figure a race like this, it's like anything, it's like you run a 100 miler, the race doesn't start till like 40 miles left. It's kind of like that type
Hmm.
of thing. So I figured with this, the first 100 and some miles doesn't even really matter. I mean, it matters, but everyone there is going to be able to run 100 miles respectively. So it's
Hmm.
really that last 100 or last 150 even, that's where you need to be ready to like run and move and be not tired and kind of focused. So that's kind of how I looked at it. Just like one big push. Uh, didn't really focus too much on the sections or what one was next or whatever, and just kind of kept moving.
Hmm. When you took the lead back from Ryan Sands, did you spend some time just sort of trying to find a way to maybe build upon that? And then was there like a point where you were like, okay, I've got a good lead here. Now I just need to like maintain. Like what was your kind of headspace like with that?
Like after he passed me,
Yeah, once he passed you, did you kind of change the way you were going about things at all? And then when you passed him back, how did you kind of wrap your head around the rest of the race at that point?
yeah, I felt pretty good when he passed me because when I laid down, I knew that he was going to pass me because I knew he was only
Hmm.
4 or 5 minutes behind me. He wasn't very far behind me, and so they were like, "Hey, he's going to pass you, but you should definitely lay down now." And the big thing we kept saying in our crew was like, you know, you invest in your like invest now to get results later in a race like this. So even laying down, if you don't even sleep, that's an investment in yourself later. And so it was kind of like, well, let's lay down now and sleep because that's an investment in the race later, when it's a little bit more critical. And so that's what we did. I wasn't too upset about it. I knew he was going to pass me. And then I kind of just took it as normal, like kind of easily, like, running where I can run. Like I think it was my brother and I were kind of making our way back up there. And we caught up to him. Him and his pacer relatively quick, like quicker than I was thinking. And we kind of lingered behind him a little bit, just kind of running easy and seeing about what pace he was running and like how they looked or whatever. Classic racing strategy. We're like, we gotta spy this guy up, see what's going on. But and then we were like, okay, well, let's make the pass or whatever. So we picked it up a little bit on a little downhill and just kind of like cruise past, said what's up, and felt really good. And we made a little bit of a gap going into Sedona. I don't think it was much, but I think it was probably like 10 minutes maybe or slightly under that. Um, but yeah, that was kind of the plan. Was hopefully we could catch him on the next segment and then kind of see where we're at after that.
Hmm. Were you getting updates then from there on in about how your gap was improving?
Yeah, we were. So that's one of the two things I'm like super. That is one of the two things I'm really interested in while I'm racing is where everyone else is and uh, how much like pretty much how much time is left, how many climbs we have on each segment. But so we were doing updates. My pacer would have their phone out almost the entire time, checking the live tracker, seeing where everyone was. And some of that's paranoia, but some of it is also like we had thought going into a race like this, your best bet is kind of, you know, push where you need to push, but then just coast, kind of like relax where you can. So like if I had a big gap on somebody or I was making a gap but not pushing any harder, I'd kind of just keep it that way, And then if someone was getting a little bit closer, we're like, okay, well now we need to push a little for this section or something. So just kind of like modulating your effort based on where everyone else was more the reason we were kind of checking that. And so that ended up working pretty good. But yeah, we kept eyes on him probably the whole time.
Hmm. Well, was there a point when you're like, okay, I've got a big enough lead now, I'm gonna win this thing, and I go into a little bit more maintenance mode, or was it sort of the same mindset even though you started building a lead?
I pretty much pushed the whole time until the base of Eldon. I would say until whatever that last aid station is. I can't remember. I want to say Deer Creek, but I don't think that's right. Just because I did a section, um, well, not by myself, but there's a section by myself and then a little section with a pacer right before the last aid station to go up Eldon. And I crushed that section by myself pretty good. And I was like, okay, that's nice. And then we did the section with my pacer and then got to the bottom of Eldon and we were like 10 miles ahead of him or something. And I think there I was kind of like, okay, we're going to take it easy up Eldon because we're like 6 or 7 hours ahead of course record and, you know, kind of sleepy at this point. So we're just going to get up there, stay as sturdy as possible, kind of knowing the descent off Eldon is terrible. And so, yeah, that's probably where I took it a little bit easier. But then again, no one's really running up Eldon at that point, and it was a really long, kind of windy approach to get to the base, and then you really start climbing and get to the top. And I wanted to save some effort for the descent, but I didn't really think I for sure had it until we were about halfway down the descent. Just because I was like, he might be feeling really good and like jog some of that, and then I was going really slow down too, and so I was like, he may catch up. It may be a sprint finish. we may come, we may come into town at the same time, and I'm kind of was like thinking that would be cool, but then also it would be horribly stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. But that urgency kind of stayed intact pretty much through the end of the race. So that's it sounds like is the way your headspace was.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was your strategy for sleeping? Were you kind of just taking it as it that comes, or was there like certain spots on the course where like I'm no matter what, I'm laying down and trying to take a nap there?
So I didn't have an exact sleep strategy, but our sleep plan was like starting at Jerome, which is where I did take my first nap. They're just gonna have the bed ready in the car every time. And then if I need to, I'll just lay down. Like if I feel like I'm really ready to sleep, I'll just lay down there. So that was kind of the plan. No real planned time. It was just kind of again like how much time we had. So say I have like a 3 or 4 mile lead or whatever. We'd be like, okay, well we could lay down like 15 minutes or something, and that wouldn't kill us. Uh, which I ended up laying down. I think it was like 58 minutes total, and then I think we slept like 20 of it, which kind of checks out to what I thought I would do. I was weirdly in my head, I thought to myself, we might be able to do this without sleep, which after the first day, I was kind of like, yeah, I definitely know that I need to take a nap within the next like 10 hours, probably, because that would just be dumb.
Hmm.
You would just be useless, essentially. And so that was kind of the plan. Just have it ready and then keep it short and try to, stockpile it a little bit earlier, at least after the first day.
Hmm. Yeah, I've asked as many people as I could have done multi-day stuff about like the sleep strategy and try to compare that with the research we do have on kind of the approaches that are out there. It's mostly on like bike racing stuff where you get any of the research, but a lot of the multi-day ultra runners sort of have that same message as you do, where it's like you kind of know it's going to be optimal to sleep at some point. Like that stoppage and rest is going to actually get me to the finish line quicker. But if you get too specific about when, you're probably going to waste time because then you end up trying to sleep when you can't, or forcing yourself through a phase where you should just lie down and take a nap and get it over with, but you try to push through because you didn't have it planned there or something like that. So it's almost like one of those things where you have to have a strategy in place that you're going to do it, but be very flexible about when is the way that would probably be the most consistent theme that I've heard.
Yeah, I would agree. That makes sense. I mean, unless you're an expert sleeper, like if you have some gift where you can lay down and make yourself go to sleep instantly, I think you just kind of bide your time until you know that you're super exhausted. Maybe not like super like on the edge of like passing out for good, but tired enough to where you're like, okay, if I lay down, I'll probably fall asleep for at least a couple minutes. Which we weren't too
Mm-hmm.
stressed out about not sleeping when laying down. Just kind of go back to our regular theme of like it's still an investment in the future of the race, like in the latter half of the race. Like even just laying down is good. Just getting time off, being horizontal, like letting your blood kind of, you know, do its thing, level out a little bit or whatever. Um, Being horizontal does, but so it wasn't too bad, like stress wise. But um, I would agree that's kind of the best way to do it, at least for me.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably onto something. I think there's also a piece to that puzzle where like when you're racing out there, versus just trying to like take things as they come. Like you have like a mental fatigue that's just a little bit different. And when that's on, it's like this constant theme that's just running kind of in the background at the very least, if not the forefront of your mind. And sometimes I find like with those really short breaks, it's like you gave yourself a break from actually focusing on that. And even if that's just a few minutes, it's like when you start back up, you're like, okay, I sort of kind of rebooted that focus side of things. And then you can kind of take that challenge on again versus it feeling it's almost like a mental interval session where it's like you can go further at that same intensity if you had minor little breaks in there. And like I've noticed this with shorter races like 100 milers where I mean I've done 100 milers where I've stopped for like less than a minute or two during the race itself when they're on these track type settings.
That's good.
And even in those, when I do stop, it's usually to use the bathroom. And every time I do it, I realize, oh, that was kind of a mental reset. I feel it's so much easier to focus now after that. So then I started thinking, like, okay, maybe don't resist the bathroom breaks as long as possible. Obviously, be strategic with them to some degree because you don't want to have a ton of non moving time, but they have their value. And I think when you start weighing in like all those different systems that are kind of operating and how a short break kind of impacts them, you start kind of connecting some of those dots.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I'd thought about that after the race as well. It's funny. I hadn't really thought about it again since now to now, but it was definitely like a mental break, especially for me because I was just thinking, not really thinking about a whole lot of anything, but it's kind of nice to not be thinking about the race because you're just laying in the back of a van, with an eye mask on sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're just back there, whatever. It's like you don't have to be doing anything, and it is kind of refreshing, just that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have a specific fueling strategy that you were trying to use during the race itself, of trying to like hit certain types of foods or carbohydrate totals or anything like that, or was that a little more intuitive?
That was, I mean, I guess initially going in, it was kind of like, I knew I probably wasn't going to be pushing like Javelina type nutrition just because I don't think you could probably eat like 100 carbohydrates an hour for 58 hours. I mean, I guess you could, but it might cause a little GI distress because to do that, you're still doing a lot of gels and a lot of like liquid stuff. But yeah, I mean, I was trying to eat gels consistently. I'd started out just kind of like my standards, which is be like Morton's and Precision Gel and drinking those, and then like Tailwind, sipping Tailwind pretty consistently, like a little bit higher carb ratio of it, and that was good. I mean, for the first probably day or so, or almost whole day, and then I stopped being able to eat. Well, I was eating some solids too, like Morton solids, like just like things like that. I wasn't taking a bunch of weird stuff with me. The only like weird thing I was taking with me in the beginning was oatmeal cream pies, just because they're
Okay.
soft, like
Yeah.
easy to eat, and I love them. And I'd been training with them, so I was like, all right, I'll just keep eating those. And but nothing really particular. It was kind of just like whatever, as much as I can get down, I knew would be reasonable. I wouldn't over consume to where I got sick, but I was like, you need to be consuming stuff regularly. Towards the middle end of the race, it was kind of more just like Morton's and just oatmeal cream pies and kind of like stuff like that. And then really, my big thing was I was going to eat a lot of food at the aid stations, so like hot food. And I was kind of really, that's one of the, I guess I'm really lucky. Like my stomach is pretty good. Like I can just eat stuff like real food during a race and it's not a problem. Especially at this intensity, it's not nearly as hard, you know? And so
Hmm.
ramen was on the meal plan for most aid stations, like cup of noodles, just a classic, and then whatever protein they would have there. Just because I knew I kind of had to be like eating some protein, or should at least, or try. And
Hmm.
so that was kind of an issue sometimes, just because we would beat the aid station, and so my crew would have to like scrounge like gas stations, Denny's, McDonald's, like wherever they could get food. So I ate a couple like gas station burritos warmed up in the microwave because there was no food at the aid station. I ate a Denny's burger at one point, like a McDonald's breakfast, which I had never eaten in my entire life. So that was a first. Um, And then, yeah, just like bacon cheeseburger again and Sedona and some pancakes. So I guess the big focus as far as like that's concerned is just trickling in nutrition throughout the run, like standard, and then at the aid station eating as much as I could. And I was
Hmm.
able to do that the whole time, which I was really happy with.
That's right. I had forgotten about that the lead group kind of outpaced the aid stations just due to the how fast everyone was moving compared to what you'd seen in the
Mhm.
past years. So and then that's actually like a really important piece to the puzzle because the aid stations they have at these 200 like at Air Viper, they're great aid stations. Like when they're set up, like they have all sorts of stuff in there.
Yeah,
Like you wouldn't have to probably ever venture outside of what their offerings are. But if you get there before any of that's set up, yeah, you're scrounging for convenience store or like you said, getting McDonald's and Denny's whatever's available.
that's what we were doing. That's all we had. So it was nuts. Which after the one burrito, that's when I had. So I had a lot of issues a couple of years ago. Well, like a year and a half ago with like swelling. I was taking in way too much salt and I didn't know it. And then I got a sweat test done, and I was like, yeah, I don't need that much salt. And so I was taking in like the classic, like almost 1,000 milligrams, a liter or whatever on like
Mhm.
hot days. But I only sweat like 635 milligrams of
Okay.
sodium or whatever. So that made sense. And so I switched that. So I'm kind of susceptible to like a ton of salt, especially this year at Cocodona. It wasn't super hot, but I ate this burrito. It had like 1,000 milligrams of salt in it, and then with all the other stuff I was taking, like that's what my hands swelled a little bit. Luckily, nothing else did because sometimes back in the day, my knees would swell up and feel kind of weird, even.
Mhm.
But especially my hands, and like which that doesn't really affect your running. It just is kind of weird and uncomfortable, and you're like, what the heck is wrong with my hands? Um, so that happened after that burrito, but uh, that was it. Yeah, that's yeah,
But you were able to course correct just by kind of pulling back on electrolytes maybe for a while.
for sure. We just drank some more water and kind of wrote it out.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much going on there. I mean, it's interesting. Like my sweat tests are similar to yours. I think I'm like 614 milligrams per liter. So if I get too aggressive with electrolytes, comparatively to the average person or a high sweater, then I get that same experience. I start noticing, oh yeah, my fingers are starting to get puffy and start getting a little more thirsty than you normally would. And yeah, and it's just a wild spot because I mean, when you look at the range, I mean, the range is from like freakishly low, like below us, where like some people are like 300 milligrams per
Oh,
liter, which just I'm just like these people must never eat salt. Like they just like must never touch a salt shaker. Like it just whatever's in the food, they probably get enough of it. And then there's I had Andy Blow on the podcast a couple of years ago. He's the precision fuel and hydration guy, and
okay.
he was telling me he was the exact opposite. He was like I think he said he registered in at over 2 grams per liter. So he's like 3x us.
Well, that's
And
not to interrupt you, but I think David Roche posted a thing and it was like 3,200 milligrams.
yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like you might want to get a couple more tests. That seems kind of high.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
that was a false high, dude. I don't know. But if it works, it works. If you're taking that in and not getting sick or something, that's obviously right. But
Yeah. Yeah, there is, there is some interesting stuff to consider too. I also had Alyssa Clark on, and she had the sweat test done, and I don't remember what her results were. I think they were like in the 900s, but she also has ulcerative colitis.
uh,
So they found out that like her body wasn't processing all of that. So even though she required like, I think it was like 900 milligrams per liter, she actually has to take in closer to like 1500 because her body's only going to absorb like the a fraction of what she takes. So like it gets a little bit goofy from it at the individual level at times, but
yeah,
um I think like if you kind of use like some general protocols like what you described too, where it's like if you start out at the recommendations and you notice your fingers are getting puffy and you're getting extra thirsty, it probably stands to reason you're losing a lot less than you're putting in, or if you're getting like really lightheaded after runs and things like that, even though you're like following the recommendations perfectly, then yeah, maybe there's a chance that you're a little bit on the higher side and could start benefiting from adding a little bit more. But
yeah.
it is funny how there's that big of a range, but we all end up on these same starting lines.
It's nuts. I mean, that's a huge range for some people. I mean, that's almost 2,000 milligrams different,
Hmm.
which is insanity to me. But I guess that checks out. Some people are, you know, just inherently better in like different conditions, and some it could be your electrolyte loss.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets interesting too because like if you look at fluid loss rates then too that can vary. So like if I look at my wife Nicole and my our results, she loses closer to a gram per liter. So you would think, okay, she needs more electrolytes than I do. But if we actually go out in similar conditions and go for a run, I'm gonna lose way more fluid than she will at any given hour.
Sure.
So even though that I need less electrolyte per liter of sweat, I'm just sweating so much more than she is that I actually end up taking in more electrolytes than she does. And I wonder about that sometimes too from like an efficiency standpoint because you have like a year at Cocodona where it's like hotter temps in those early stages and it is sort of a battle of like I need to get in as much as I can and that's not going to be quite enough. If you start seeing folks that are maybe on the lower end of the need side just doing a little better on those years because they can weather that storm a little bit better than say someone who needs way more fluid or way more electrolytes and end up at Crown King just a little bit more wrecked because of that.
Definitely.
A big thanks to Element, Delta G Ketones, Currents, and Maui Nui Venison for supporting the podcast. A full description of how I use these products can be found at the end of the episode. Discounts, promotions, and details can also be found in the show notes and at the end of the episode. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So, I mean, it's pretty early. So maybe you had it planned out at the beginning of the year, but what do you got coming up next?
So I'm on the wait list for Western States. I got
Oh, are you? Okay. Wow.
cool. I was 26th, and now I'm 2 spots away. So um, I'm pretty sure I'll be going to Western June
Yeah.
25th. So that's coming up. So I'm kind of like full blown recovery for like 2 weeks, and then get some track work in. I guess that's what the cool kids are
Yeah.
doing. So I'll do some speed work for 2 weeks or so, and then just taper and go. And no real expectations. Kind of, I mean, there's no way I could have any on myself just because it's so close to Cocodona that I may feel okay, but I know that for a race like that, you'd want to train 6 or 8 months just for that race. And so it's kind of like I don't want to hold myself to any goals, any lofty goals or anything going in. Just kind of do the best I can, obviously, and feel as good as I can on the start line, and try to stay up there with everybody. And I think best case scenario, I snake somehow into a top 10 position.
Yeah.
Given the people who are going to be there, I'm sure the front is going to be insane. And so, kind of
Hmm.
like Cocodona, maybe I bide my time and somehow find my way in the 10th position, and that'd be really sweet. That'd be like best case scenario,
Hmm.
but more just a reconnaissance race. And then we have a local 100K here, Hurricane 100K, that I do every year, and it's fun and close. It's like 30 minutes from my house. They've got a lot of nice trails up there, and big prize money too. It's like $2,500 for first place. So
Oh, nice.
we go every year, of course. Um, Fun race, and then I think I'm going to sign up for. Well, I'm going to sign up for JFK too and do that.
Oh, right on.
Never done it.
Yeah.
Always
That one's a
wanted to. It's like close to my parents. They live in southern Pennsylvania, so it's kind of close. And yeah, I want to do that. Kind of get some more speed work in because that's one of the goals next year is just kind of stay fast in the 100-mile distance, and but then also probably do another 200 for sure. And so that's kind of the outlook. I'm not sure 100% what races everything will be, but uh, that's kind of what we're thinking.
hmm That is really interesting because it's like, yeah, Western states is obviously you take that opportunity when it comes, regardless of whether you've done Cocodona or not. I think it's going to be interesting though, because it's sort of like I've I used to live just outside of Auburn, and I would talk to a lot of the guys, the locals there who've been following the sport forever, and they would always say like it goes through these iterations where people think like, okay, you have to run this fast in order to be in the top 10 or this is the way that you got to do it. This is the new normal. And then you'll have something weird happen, whether it's weather related or just people getting out a little too fast up front and drawing more people than normal out. And then you have like these scenarios where like there's just an implosion in the front end of the field. And then you get people going from like 25th at Forest Hill into the top 10.
Exactly.
And it's like, we're going to have one of those years eventually. And maybe it's this year, and your race strategy and sort of attitude towards it will yield a return spot for the following year where you can properly peak for it.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be best case scenario. No, my hopes are not up. I'm not expecting it, but that would be best case scenario.
Cool. Well, you'll be dangerous just because of that headspace, I think.
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll see. We won't put pressure on you. We'll let you relish the Cocodona crown as long as you need. So,
Beautiful.
plus, David's doing a good job at taking the pressure off of most people
Yes.
with all his Western States content right now. So,
He's putting it out there.
awesome. Yeah, JFK will be a fun one too for you too. I think that's always a fun race for people to get into because it's such a kind of a unique course where you go over those Appalachian section early on, but then from there it's just an absolute racetrack. So
Yeah,
I think you'll probably like that balance.
I think so. I'm looking forward to it. That's one I've always wanted to do. I just never I never fit it in, just especially with Javelina the last 2 years. It's kind of like not really in the cards just because it's too close. Um,
Hmm.
but this year, I don't know. Not sure if I'm going to do Javelina again um, yet, but that means I can do JFK.
Hmm. Yeah, does that depend slightly on how Western States goes? Because I assume maybe you were going to Javelina because it's just a great competitive race nowadays, but it's also a golden ticket race. And given that you were fourth and third, it seems like you're kind of right in there from a contention to getting a ticket to Western States through that event.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I like the distance. I like the course. I think fits me really well. It's kind of like my dream 100-mile trail course. So that reason I liked it, and then yeah, it's a golden ticket race, which is good for a lot of reasons. But yeah, I guess I'd like to go to Western States next year again. So hopefully that's somehow. But I'm not like super stressed out about it either. Like I'll go eventually again, and um, there's other races you can go to that are worth it. So I'm not too stressed about making it to Western States next year, I guess.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, you're right on. It's like it's easy to get fixated on a one particular event for one reason or the other, but at the end of the day, there's just a complete dearth of awesome events out there that you can always target. So
Oh yeah.
we're definitely have no shortage of fun opportunities on the landscape of ultra running right now.
Yep.
Have you considered anything like some of these like backyard type races or something like that after doing
I
so well at Cocodona?
Yeah, that's kind of, like always interested me, especially early. Like I was kind of cool with learning about, like older 6 day events, like crazy indoor stuff. Like I think that's just really interesting. I did a backyard once when I first started running. Actually, my first ultra was like a 24-hour race around a 2 mile
Oh,
flood.
okay.
It was around a 2 mile flood wall, and it was like concrete. And I had been training for a 50K, and then it got canceled due to like land problems and like COVID and stuff. And so I was kind of mad about that. And so then I looked up the same weekend what was another race, and it was this 24-hour race around a 2 mile loop. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And my mindset going into that was I'm going to run until I can't run anymore or stand. And I accomplished that. And to this day, even after Cocodona, that was the worst I've ever felt at a race. The last loop that I did, it took me 45 minutes to go 2 miles on a flat asphalt loop. I only made it 90 miles. It took me 18 and almost 19 hours, but it's still to this day the worst I've ever felt. It was absolutely terrible.
The 24 hours an interesting event. I've had nothing but failure at it. It's just like one of those things where it's like I haven't solved that riddle for myself. Ironically, I've had some very successful coaching clients do well at it and make great improvements, but I haven't been able to apply that to my own efforts yet. But yeah, when it goes bad on those short loop courses like that, when you got nothing but time to look forward to,
Yeah,
it's it can get pretty ugly out there. So I can appreciate that.
yeah.
It's one where I think it takes a couple cracks at it. Do you think you'll do another 24-hour in the future? Or?
I mean, hopefully, or something like that. I think it would be fun to do. Um, that one I was totally unprepared for. I mean, I was not training for it. I don't even think I was running like mileage really yet. I was running maybe 75 to 90 miles a week, sometimes less than that every here and there. So the feet were just not even close to prepared for the slaughter I was about to put them through,
Yeah.
you know? And so
The
I
flat
ended it in
pavement meat
chacos,
grinder.
dude. I ended it in a pair of like sandals. I was like, I can't even wear shoes right now. Um, but I would like to do one again. I think it'd be a lot more fun now.
Yeah, I think you would improve upon your previous experience by quite a bit. It'd be interesting to see. Um, yeah, you did remind me of something. What kind of mileage are you hitting these days? Or I think on the live stream they were saying that you peaked at like 150 miles or something like that, but I never know what to believe when you hear the live feed stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of like for like getting ready for the last probably like year and a half, 2 years, running like you know 85 to 130 miles a week, give or take. Sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower. And then this year, right after Javelina, kind of amping that up to like the occasional 90, mostly 100, and then up to 160. So a lot of like 120s, 130s, 140s, and then like 2 times I went to 160. That included like um, some walks in there too. So it's like whatever. But it was pretty close to 160 of just straight running. And so that's kind of
Hmm.
what the mileage looked like. I think it was this year alone. I think from January to the start line, I'd ran like 2,200 miles. And so I was
Okay.
pretty like confident in like my feet and everything because nothing had bothered me. And that's another thing too, like training for this where I wasn't doing, like 2 workouts a week and, longer workout sessions and then also keeping the mileage like pretty lofty. Nothing really like hurt. Like typically I get ready for a race and then right before I start tapering, I'll have like something that's kind of been nagging me and I'm like, I hope that this taper completely fixes this because it feels kind of sketchy. Like, you know how that is. It's like something bothering you, and you're like, please don't be an injury. But I think
Hmm.
the way it feels, if I taper, it will feel okay. Where that's pretty much been the last couple races I've done. And for this one, I didn't really have any of that just because it was just a different intensity level. Um, and so that was nice. But that's kind of what the mileage looked like going in. And
Hmm.
I wanted to get the one of the big things I switched after Javelina to get ready for this race was just general training time. So I did a lot of stair climber initially. Like in the first couple months, I would do stair climber 4 to 5 times a week, sometimes more than that for like an hour at a time. At a pretty good clip, like pretty good pace going on that thing. And that was mostly just to like just get extra time in zone two because stair climber is great. You get your heart rate to like 120 and just like keep it there for an hour, and you're not running, so the
Hmm.
the impact is like not as bad, and it's helping my hip flexors get strong and my glutes and stuff like that. It doesn't translate exactly to running up a slope because it's like your foot's in a different position, but it still helps. And then so that was kind of the biggest addition, but that was to get my hours per week from like 16 to set 18 to up in the 20s, sometimes like 25, 26 hours a week of training.
Hmm.
And so that was pretty good. A couple times I got near 30 hours a week of training, but fitting that in around working is kind of like you're getting home at like 8:30 at
Yeah.
like 8 o'clock at night and you're eating dinner like 8:30, 9 o'clock every night. And you're just like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, you're just eating, sleeping, and working at that
That's
point. So you can peak like that, but you don't want to make that the norm, that's for
no.
sure. And it's probably more sustainable just making that your peak too. But it's a great point though. It's like when you start getting to like the volumes that you've hit historically, it's like adding more running miles. You're going to take on the additional risk of the pounding of that for very little incremental gains. But like, yeah, you get on like a stair step or a bike or some of these low impact modalities and it's like yeah you can amplify that exposure to that low intensity stuff and really build up a strong system aerobic system around that sort of thing. So I think that'll be an interesting. I mean, we've always seen that in ultra running, but I don't know that it's ever really been formalized to like include things other than just like you get people just doing it kind of intuitively. Like there will be ski mountaineering or something, and then they're also trail runners. So they hit
Yeah.
these really massive training volume weeks sometimes when they're able to kind of get the impact off. But I think we see more of that probably as time goes on, and as these really long races like Cocodona start to get more popular.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to. I mean, just I don't know if that actually builds like fatigue resistance, but in my head it kind of does, and it's like kind of back to my initial training for ultras is just as much as you can do without getting hurt. And you got to incrementally get to that, you know? So it's been like, a couple years in the making, getting to where I can do whatever now and not get like hurt. Um, but yeah, the more stuff you can add in. And the nice thing too, if you're doing a couple hours of stair climber or whatever, elliptical or some other type of cross training, then to get the mileage, you end up just having to run longer runs. So instead of running like 12 miles in the morning and like 8 or 9 miles in the evening, I would just go ahead and run like 18 miles in the morning and then like 4 miles in the evening and then do stair climber, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. We were getting up a lot earlier too. Instead of waking up at like 5:45, 6, I'm getting up at like 4. And so you can run a little longer and run a little slower, and it makes your runs longer, which I think is good too, just being out there for longer. Like doubles are great. I will always probably double a lot just because I like the way it feels and I like the schedule of it. But I think for a race like Cocodona, just like doing the longer, like doing if you do, I think it's great to get 3 15-mile plus runs plus a long run on the weekend. Like maybe that's 25 30 miles. That's pretty good like running volume all on one runs, which I think is important too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it sounds like you're checking a lot of the boxes and kind of like thinking about all these different things, which I find like when people get a little too one-dimensional with something, that's where maybe weaknesses start to kind of flare up or things get neglected. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see how things kind of progress with your career. I know you're not even at your 100-mile peak yet, so
Oh,
we
thank
got
you.
lots of fun stuff to come. Yeah.
Who knows,
you've
dude?
got you've got probably a whole nother decade before you get there, so
Yeah, I hope so, man. I'd love to do this for another 10, 15 years, if I can. That's the goal. So it's kind of
awesome.
it's kind of crazy to even think that you can do that, but I mean, you totally can. I mean, you guys kill it. So I don't know how old you are, but how old are you?
I'm 39.
Yeah, that's insane. Because I mean, you just had a last year. Did you just run? You did a pretty fast 100 last year, right? Or is it a couple? Or is it?
Yeah, I did an 11:50. Was it 51? I think 51 or 52.
Yeah, I know. I saw that it was
So
sub 12, and I was like, dude, that's insane.
yeah.
You know?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's well, and the other thing too is like I think we've seen this as well. If you look at like Alexander Sorokin when he broke the 100-mile world record, uh, and the 24-hour world record for that matter, he was in his 40s. So, um,
Crazy.
yeah, I think like it's you sort of hit this spot I think where you've got like in your case when you're that age, you're gonna have a couple of decades worth of aerobic development, and the pace and intensity for even a fast 100-mile is really low compared to your upper limit. So even if you lose a little bit of that top end, just your experience and knowledge of pacing and proper fueling and whatever else comes along from an improvement standpoint between now and then
Hmm.
uh, is probably going to outweigh any small degradation you have for the top end of things. And then it's just, yeah, you can get out there and grind and run some pretty fast ultras, I think. So, yeah, just stay healthy as best you can. That's usually the path forward.
Yeah, that's true.
Stay
That
healthy and interested,
that
and you'll
pretty
be good.
that pretty much goes. Yeah, you got to do that. You got to drink your water and eat your vegetables and.
Yeah, all the good stuff, right? Yeah. So, well, Dan, where can folks find you? Do you have like a website, Instagram, or anything like that
I
where
have an
you put
Instagram. It's
out?
just Dan is Green. Should be a picture of me. If
Perfect.
looks similar to this. And then we're starting like a little YouTube channel. Hopefully, put some like stuff on there. Just I have a video of my race that my buddy Ryan put together. It's called Bargain Boys Media,
Okay.
because we're a
Nice.
bargain, dude. We don't have any sponsors yet, and we're doing stuff. So I mean, we're pretty much doing it for
Yeah.
free. But So yeah, you get on there. We put together a video. Well, Ryan put together a video of the race, and it's pretty cool. It's not anything crazy, but it's really good for iPhone, dude. It's pretty good. We like it.
Nice.
But that's it.
Well,
And Strava,
I'll
just
link both of those into the
no, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt
you're
you.
good. I was gonna say I'm on
Yeah,
Strava too. That's my preferred form of social media. So uh, you can
perfect.
find me on there.
Yeah, we can check out all the cool training inputs that you're up to over there. But yeah, I'll link all that stuff to the show notes too. It'd
That'd
be
be
fun. I'll
sick.
have to go check out that YouTube video. I love those sort of like live in the moment type recordings and stuff like that. It's always good to kind of see what's happening when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, it's funny to watch. It was nice because my girlfriend didn't get to go. She's in her third year of medical school here at Marshall, and her schedule's like tight, so she wasn't able to come out.
Hmm.
But it was nice to be able to rewatch the video with her, and it's kind of like, you know, which you've had videos of stuff you've done probably before, and it is kind of cool that you have something like that solidified in time that you can kind of go back and look at.
Yeah,
Even if it's
no doubt.
long, short, good, bad, it doesn't matter. Like just having like some footage of it somewhere is awesome.
No doubt. No doubt. Awesome, Dan. Well, thanks a bunch for taking some time to chat. It was fun to learn a little bit more about your training, lifestyle, and then Cocodona stuff and what you got coming up.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for sticking around and listening to how I use the show sponsors. Maui Nui Venison is a product I discovered last year. What caught my eye was their quality and business model. They have paired the need to manage an invasive species with providing some of the most nutrient-dense meat you will find. The axis deer arrived in Maui in single digits but grew fast and have damaged the local ecosystem, and if left unchecked are projected to reach up to 200,000 in number in future years. Maui Nui decided to solve this problem and minimize waste. Axis deer meat provides 43% of your daily value of protein in just 107 calories and boasts a 1.5 to 1 omega 6 to omega 3 ratio, which is the most balanced ratio of any red meat. This same 107 calories provides 22% of your daily value of vitamins and 37% of your daily value of minerals. They have a wide range of products including ground venison, leg medallions, rib chops, strip loin, loin fillets, and loin chops. They also make a beef stick that includes an option with organ meats, which makes a perfect protein-packed snack that I will usually have in the afternoon before a strength session. I've also been enjoying the ground venison for dinner, usually paired with steamed vegetables or a sweet potato. You can find a bunch of recipes and ways to prepare their products on their website at mauinuivenison.com. Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte supplement. Based on my electrolyte loss rate of 614 milligrams per liter, I begin my day with half a packet of one of their hot beverage flavors with my morning coffee. I rotate through all of them, but my favorite at the moment is the chocolate mint. Later in the day, I have been having either a packet of their watermelon flavor or a can of Element Sparkling, which is their carbonated electrolyte drink. I usually have the black cherry lime or watermelon flavor for those. If you are curious about how to dial in your own fluid and electrolyte setup, check out episode 300 of this podcast, where I dive into some of the things you can do at home to gauge how much fluid and electrolytes you may need. A free sample pack with your first purchase can be found at drinklmnt.com/HPO. Delta G ketones is the best researched exogenous ketone supplement on the market. The research on exogenous ketones is constantly evolving. Delta G is responsible for much of it, hosting 50 plus published studies and 20 plus ongoing studies, and have received DARPA grants designed for special forces. Delta G uses ketone esters, which is unmatched in raising blood ketone levels when matched per gram. The best use case, as the evidence currently stands, is as a post-workout supplement for better recovery and or during longer, lower intensity sessions to help with mental focus. For this reason, I will have a bottle of Delta G Performance, that's the little blue bottle, after my biggest workouts for the week and during long run training sessions once I have been out running for about 45 to 60 minutes. Head over to deltagketones.com and enter BITTER20 for 20% off your next purchase. Currents, which is spelled Curranz, is a pre-workout supplement that I started using this year based on the mounting evidence that has started pointing towards them as being a potential endurance workout supplement that can help move the needle on things like recovery, blood flow, fat oxidation rate, reduce muscle damage, etc. They have 40 plus studies on their website if you want to check those out. The way I use this product is when I wake up in the morning, I usually have a cup of coffee and some electrolytes and just start my day getting hydrated. And while I'm doing that, I'll have a couple capsules of currants along with that. And then I get out for my first workout. If I'm doing something a little bit longer, like a really long ultra-specific long run or an ultramarathon race or something like that, where I'm going to be out there for multiple hours, I'll usually have another capsule or two every 4 hours while out there doing that. So I'm excited to see what this can possibly do for some of the races I got coming up this year. If you want to check them out and some of the research that they have, head over to currentsusa.com. That's curranzusa.com. And don't forget to plug in the promo code BITTER20DEAL, which will get you 20% off your first purchase. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.